Yeah, we're good. Right on.
Hold it like that.
All right, everybody. I'll turn it over to Griff, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for zooming in here while we're at shoot around. Know you guys are going to have to go back to work here when shoot around is over, so appreciate you taking the time to do this. Hey, trade deadline's an interesting time in every city in the league, and I think for us this was one where we're really trying to take the measure of how good we truly are, and how good we truly aren't. And I think where we sort of landed during this trade deadline is, while we're 5 games under 500, and we're certainly not where we want to be on the season, we are 13th best in the league in scoring differential in the whole league, and we're 8th best in the West. And we've got the 7th best offense in the league, and unfortunately the 28th defense. And I think what you've seen, because we've got a very good scoring differential and not a very good record, is exactly what you're supposed to expect from a very young team that hasn't learned how to win yet. And that's how this goes. That's what growth and maturation looks like. Losing the Portland game, a game that we snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, is a game that you've got to get if your record's going to reflect how well you played in the game. You won that game. You put yourself in position to win that game, and we didn't get it. And that's what young teams do. Getting over the hump and learning how to battle through that is a big part of how we grow and evolve. And I think you've seen our response to that in the last 6 games. So we're 4-2. We've got the 3rd best scoring differential in the league in that period of time. We've got the 5th best offense and the 8th best defense in that period of time. So we're moving in the right direction. And if you watch us play, it should be very evident that our young kids are growing and evolving in a very positive way. We can get into specific players if you want to ask questions about them, but I will tell you that everybody that's playing consistent minutes on our rotation right now is living up to the expectations we have for them in terms of their growth and evolution as young players. And I think that's something that is really, really important. We went into trade deadline believing that in all likelihood, continuity was the best thing for us in terms of continuing that growth and maturation process. Having said that, if we could have done something to significantly upgrade the team, we certainly would have liked to have done that. And I think we were very aggressively looking to do that. And what we did do, and what we were very happy to do, is add 2 guys to our roster, and James Johnson and Wes Iwundu, that are extremely competitive, defensive-oriented players. I mentioned earlier we were 28th in defense on the season, and while we have turned the corner a little bit there, being 8th in the last 6 games, it's certainly not something where we believe we have anywhere near enough grit and edge on that side of the court, and both of these guys have that. Wes, in the form of a very young, developing kid himself, who's far from a finished product, and James Johnson, who has proven over the breadth of his career that he can guard multiple positions, having actually defended 3s, 4s, 5s, and he is an offensively very capable player as well. So we're excited about what he may be able to offer the rotation. Lastly, I would just like to say that in J.J. Redick and Nicolo Melli, we traded 2 players that we love as human beings, had a very, very full and rich experience with. We enjoy JJ a great deal on a human level. I, for one, will continue to listen to the podcast. Putting him in a highly competitive and contending environment was very important for us. And Nicolo is in a situation where he's going to be well embraced by his team. And so we thank them for their contributions to us as well, and felt like because they were not currently rotational pieces for us, we needed to do what we could to improve on the defensive side of the ball. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions you have.
Hey, Griff, Christian Clark here. When you look at the defense as a whole, why do you think it's just not where you thought it was going to be coming into the season?
Well, I think there's a lot of things, frankly, Christian, that contributed to that. One, we're really young, and we probably didn't give this coaching staff that had 2 full weeks to get ready for training camp before the NBA turned the season around 6 weeks earlier than we expected. We didn't give them quite enough defensive versatility in the lineup, and I think we've left them a very, very difficult hand to play as we entered the season. And then the season itself has made it difficult for everyone. the lack of practice time is one thing. The condensed schedule and the number of games coming one on top of the other has been a problem. But all of that compounds on a human level because we're very young. And so I think it's been something where we've been learning on the fly. And unfortunately, there's just hasn't been the time to right the ship in between games. But again, to be clear, we've been much better in the last 6 games. We've been much better over the last 10 to 15 games in areas that we needed to improve. So I think to a huge degree, what you've seen is the coaching staff is almost having to use games as a form of working on things as you might in practice.
Hey, what's up, Griff? We've been hearing rumors about Lonzo Ball basically since the start of the season. I guess how did you guys come to the decision that it was better to keep him at the trade deadline rather than making a move?
Well, Lonzo's one of the most highly scrutinized players I've ever seen. He has the most polarizing sort of narrative around him that I've ever dealt with before. He's either the greatest player in the NBA or the worst player that's ever played, and apparently there's no in between. It's been unfair to Lonzo the whole time. What's also been unfair to Lonzo, and frankly, I think everybody needs to think about this big picture-wise. It's unfair to every player that deals with this. The noise around the game is so much more significant now than it's ever been. The lack of truth in what you can read and what is said is overwhelming. So a lot of the things that's happened with Lonzo have happened because Lonzo's not a vocal guy who's going to read something online and immediately have to correct that. He's not somebody that's going to walk in front of all of you and go, that's absolute bullshit. I don't believe XYZ, because that's not who he is. But quite often that's what happens, and you read a lot of that, Will, and I think you can hear a lot of that out there too, anecdotally, around Lonzo, because he's a fascinating player. He's a guy who can do some spectacular things. And what we've seen him do is be as hard a worker as we have, improve his shooting as much as you possibly can, be diligent in the weight room. He loves his teammates. He's made it very clear personally, one-to-one, that he wants to be here. And yet what you will read is, this is a player who doesn't want to be here. He's clearly not in our plans, so you should trade him for a ham sandwich. Well, that doesn't make any sense when we know the actual real story behind Lonzo Ball. So I would just tell you, be really, really careful of the things you read. And most things that are in print because somebody stands to gain by putting them that way and by leaking those stories. And for whatever reason, Lonzo ends up the whirlwind of more of that than most.
Hey, Griff, this is Fletcher. Just to kind of maybe follow up on philosophically what kind of you just said. Do you look at guys on this team? You talked about the young players developing and where you are now. Are there certain, obviously, players that are untouchable, but where are you as far as maybe Lonzo and certain players is they are absolute core pieces of what we are going forward and will be with us?
Yeah, it's a great question, Fletcher, and I think we're learning that. Like, we've had very, very little time with this group. I think everybody, because this season has been as strange as it has, and last year extended as long as it did, I think you lose sight of the fact that this team hasn't even played 2 seasons together. They've had one real training camp and one whatever this year would be called together. And that's really, really complicated. Everybody's rookies around the league didn't get summer league. None of those young kids got to grow before this season started. So this has been an incredibly compressed period of time. So to say that we know exactly what we are or what we have would be disingenuous. I can tell you, I don't believe at all in the concept of untouchables, and I never have. I said this when we were in Cleveland and LeBron James was on the team. And everybody would say, so you would trade LeBron James? I said, I didn't say that. I said, I don't believe in the notion of untouchables. I don't like speaking to that. I don't like saying there's one core of our team that's more important than another. I think you can look and see that you would have to make some offer that would knock people down with a feather for an awful lot of guys on teams' rosters around the league. And you just have to assume that if the right time and the right fit is available, you can upgrade your roster. And when it's time to do that, you do that.
Griff, kind of following up on what Fletcher said there, you had gotten whatever 30-ish games to watch Lonzo and Zion and Brandon play together that you didn't get a lot of last year. It's been great offense, bad defense, great wins, and bad losses. Is it difficult to assess? How do you assess it to this point? And what does it kind of give you as you move into the rest of the season, into the summer, where there's a lot of decisions that still have to be made?
Yeah, I think we have been fortunate to watch, 30 games or so of that trio together, and I think they've shown incredible flashes of being a special group. I think we've also shown incredible flashes of being very disappointing, particularly on the defensive end. But I would say Lonzo consistently is above average defensively. I think what we've had as a group is a very difficult time schematically, getting everybody on the same page. Because we are so young and tend to be a very quiet team as a young team, I think communication's been an issue along the way that extends beyond those three guys. So to put the onus on those three for how good a team can or can't be being built around those three in a time like this is really unfair. So we're excited. We've seen flashes of very positive things, and we've seen things that are alarming. So we'll just continue to watch that as we grow along.
Hey, Griff. I know there was a lot of talk surrounding where JJ would end up getting sent, whether it was someplace back close to home for him. You guys obviously sent him to a team that's in the playoff hunt. Can you just talk us through the decision to send him to a team that's in that race and not necessarily closer to where he is?
Sure, Andrew. I think in JJ's situation, we spent the vast majority of the year trying to put him specifically where his family was. This is all because of the COVID situation. It's an unprecedented year and a half in everyone's life. So to think that basketball players who are just human would be any different is unfair to them. COVID has created a lot of negativity for a lot of different people, and it's put a lot of strain on families in ways that it never has before, and athletes are no different. And so we did spend a great deal of time trying to put JJ closer to home. When it became clear that the teams that were in the best position regionally for him were not necessarily the most aggressive in landing him, we did have conversations about the importance of immediately contending as he's aging. And I think we felt confident that JJ welcomed the better contending opportunity. And because we were not even clearly in the play-in at this point, I felt it was the right thing to do for him and his family.
Griff, I know Zion's background as a point guard is something you've talked about a lot since you've been here. Has the success you guys have had offensively, letting him be the lead ball handler for the past 2 months, changed the way you've thought about just building this team in the future?
Not really. I suppose, Christian, it has in terms of how quickly it's revealed itself, but not really in terms of what we expected Zion was capable of when we brought him in. Zion had always played point guard throughout his career. I know he shared that with many of you. Zion doesn't have native big man tendencies. So when you think about a lineup that would have him be, by way of example, a center, it takes him away from what his native instincts have been. He grew up as a guard. He doesn't have the natural defensive paint dominance of, I own this piece of land, and if you come here, I will challenge your shot and go vertical. That's not what he does. He played as a guard. So you'll see when we switch and he moves laterally, he's much more comfortable than when he has to play and roam from side to side in the lane. Well, that reveals itself on the offensive end as well, where this is a guy who is natively as good a playmaker for other people as you can be. His instinct on when to make the pass and where is point guard-like. But the kid is literally one of one. I think you've seen that he is the most unusual, rarest combination of traits in a basketball player. And because he's the only one like him, building around him is going to take some creativity, and it's going to take a level of risk. You're going to have to give in to the notion that he is, in fact, one of one. This is not a big, this is a playmaker, and you have to treat him as such. So I think that's how we're continuing to grow and evolve, and I'm grateful that Stan and his staff have put him in the positions they have to be as successful as they have, as quickly as they have. It's put more onus on us from a personnel standpoint to put more of the right pieces around him while he's playing that position. But I can say, Christian, while he's been very good at it, it's not something that surprises us. We just need to continue to lean into it.
Griff, why has the game of Bledsoe not translated from Milwaukee to New Orleans? Why are we seeing
I think a lot of things started to transpire for Eric in the bubble as well. Eric is a person who's trying to find his fit. He's trying to find his connection as a human being. And I think he's perfectly healthy. I think he's in a position where it's been hard for him to find his spots with the offense. Quite often that can feed into your defense. I think the whole situation for the last year and a half has been very, very hard on everyone on a human level. And I think being mindful of that with Eric is something that I'm trying to be very cognizant of. I don't think we can say anything specific right now about why it hasn't clicked for him as much as the fit just has not been particularly good for him or easy for him. And so we're trying always to try to find a way to make that work out better.
And we know that B.I. and Zion are viewed as, the pillars of this franchise moving forward, but I guess how much are those guys involved in the discussions when you're talking these trades, or which guys are going to be a part of the future of the franchise? How much do they even have a desire to be a part of those conversations?
I think those guys, like most great players, care about their teammates, and they want to know that if we're going to bring somebody to the family, they're the right kind of people. I did not talk to either of them about this trade deadline. Quite frankly, I didn't want to put them in a position where that burden was placed on them. It's not up to them as 23 and 20-year-old players to worry about doing our job. It's our job to do that, and I'm very confident that both of them trust us to do it.
Hey, Griff, what's your assessment of the three most recent draft picks, Jackson, Nikhil, and Kyra? I know you kind of talked about it recently, and they've played a lot more in the last few weeks. Have you noticed improvement? Where do you kind of see them, and what do you see their role being here now without JJ going to be in rotation?
Yeah, Scott, I think everyone's seen growth and improvement in Jackson Hayes, by way of example. Jackson's a kid who's growing and evolving very, very quickly. From the time he came back, I would say after the Christmas break probably would be the time that I could say unequivocally he was much, much better. I'm sorry, I said the Christmas break. We had a little break there at New Year's. There was a day off or so. And he came back with a totally different mindset, and he has attacked the weight room the last 6 weeks or so in a way that he hadn't. I think he's completely bought into the realization that he can play multiple positions and he can guard virtually anybody. He knows what his strengths are, and I think as he continues to learn how not to foul, he'll continue to be on the court longer, because offensively he is incredibly, incredibly gifted, and I think you're seeing that night after night now. I think Billy Hernan-Gomez playing the minutes he was playing in front of Jackson was probably something that helped spur Jackson as well. But his level of focus and attention to detail during the time that Billy was playing those minutes, his relationship with Steven and Billy have all kind of coalesced to create an incredible wave of positivism around Jackson, and he's really delivered for us of late. It would be hard for anybody to argue that. I think Kyra Lewis is playing significantly more than we anticipated when we drafted him. I think we even said this about Jackson last year. If he redshirted, it would have been fine with us. Unfortunately, there was no G League season really at the time that our season started for him to continue to get reps. And Kyra came into this with no summer league, no G League, no pre-draft workouts. So for him to be as good as he is already in NBA games as a 19-year-old kid is mind-numbing. And like Jackson, he's among the very hardest workers on our team. He's incredibly diligent in the weight room. His attention to his player development workouts with Teresa Weatherspoon have been incredible. So I think you're seeing him grow and evolve very rapidly, far more rapidly than we had any right to believe he would. And Nikhil Alexander-Walker is somebody that we believe very strongly is a starter in this league. And when he's had consistent opportunities to play minutes, I think he's shown that. I think he had a stretch of games where he was not particularly good playing consistent minutes, but he's also shown incredible flashes of brilliance. And we think as he grows and evolves as a player, he's going to show more and more of those and less of the frustrating times.
Griff, I have just a follow-up, but I wanted to ask another question. Do you think, maybe following up, you just mentioned Nikhil, that we could see him start with Lonzo, but that's not the question. That was just a follow-up. The question was, you've been doing this a long time, obviously, Cleveland and Phoenix. Was this year any different, or was it the the trade deadline is normal for you? And how do you handle that? Do you go home and think about what could have been, or do you just kind of wash it and let it go and realize what happened? And because of COVID and free agency this summer and maybe a smaller market, was it a flurry of phone calls where you close? And then I expect you to get specific, but maybe just how it evolved for you this year.
I wouldn't say trade deadline specifically was any different. The start of the season was horrifically bad for everybody. It's no different for us than it was every team in the league. To have to go into training camp with 2 weeks of an open transaction window instead of 20, that's just totally unheard of for all of us. No one's ever dealt with that. No matter how long you've been in the league, you've never dealt with that. So that was unusual. This trade deadline was not particularly different than any other. It was an open transaction window in the way that it normally would have been. So you just had to continue with the usual calculus of opportunity and timing and cost. I think we were very aggressively looking to improve our team. And I think we made it very clear to teams that had players we thought were upgrades that we were willing to go very deeply after those players. And if those opportunities don't mesh, you just continue along. That's no different than any other year. We didn't have a level of urgency this year that was any different than any other. We also just didn't find the right fit to get significantly better, and we're really grateful we were able to do what we did. And quite frankly, the best trades quite often are the ones you don't make. So we're comfortable where we are. Did you have another question, Fletcher, on the back of that?
Sorry, I just wanted to ask about maybe seeing Nikhil and Lonzo potentially more together. I know that that's probably Stan's decision, but is that something you all discuss?
Yeah.
Starting in capacity. Yeah.
Sure. I think because of Lonzo's injury situation, and I don't expect he plays today or tomorrow, quite frankly, because of his injury situation, I think it's made it so that you're seeing Nikhil in his role rather than seeing Nikhil with him. But I think you absolutely will see that as we continue along, particularly as the coaches get the James Johnson piece integrated a little bit. The versatility James have will make it so that our lineups change a little bit in ways that they weren't. So I certainly think you could see Nikhil and Lonzo together. I think you're going to see more of Kyra and Nikhil together as well. So I'm excited about where those kids are heading together.
All right, I think that'll wrap it up. Thank you, Griff, for your time.
Thank you, guys.